my relationship with J. Cole, I didn't start off as his creative director. That wasn't on my bingo card.
So how do people get rich off making movies?
The concert film was, I'm embarrassed to say how much it was. Showed them the film and they hated it. This is not what we paid for. There are plenty commercial directors that are making like $100,000 a day doing like one day of work. They spent, I think, $15 million on it. I was like, I could have literally done that on my iPhone. I remember I posted a clip of it because I was like, dude, this is too good to not share. His lawyer reached out and sent me a cease and desist.
I know you probably can't say a lot, but what can you say about the album, The Fall Off?
Yeah.
Scott Lazer, creative director, filmmaker. Let's start with your story a little bit. How do you even become a creative director, filmmaker? I feel like a lot of people want that as a career.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how did that start for you?
Well, it always started, like, it was always, I guess it started as filmmaking. And by that, I mean, it really started with storytelling. I think I've always been drawn to good stories, even, and sometimes in particular, stories that we share with each other, you know, verbally, and through writing. I've been a fan of movies since I was very young. I wouldn't call myself like a major cinephile or anything, but I definitely watched a lot of movies. And when I got to college, I didn't go to film school, but I found a couple of film classes that were taught in the English department by a professor there who became a mentor. And she was and is a documentary filmmaker. So the classes that she taught were primarily nonfiction, you know, video classes. And I just loved it. I fell in love with the editing process. That was something that she really emphasized. The classes that she taught, they were filmmaking classes, but it was not like in film school, you're taught film production. So you do like lighting and sound recording and cinematography, all these like technical things that you master through your process through your time in film school. With these classes at my college, it was not about the technical part of filmmaking. It was just about telling a good story. So, and a lot of that was sort of brought to bear through the process of editing. And yeah, I mean, I've thought a lot about why I felt so drawn to editing. Certainly part of it has to do with, like I said, a fascination with great storytelling. But I have reflected actually on an early part of my life. I went to a Montessori school. I don't know if you're familiar with those types of schools, but they're very like tactile. When you're like learning to count, you're like taking, you know, there's bins, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You put one stick in the one bin, 2 sticks in the 2 bin. The maps are like puzzles that you like physically put together. And I do think that like those early experiences, those like educational experiences, gave me a sort of organizational mindset that you know, grew into a love down later on, a love for editing, because so much of editing is like organizing a bunch of material that you like collect, you know. And then of course through that process you learned how to shoot things better, so that when you get to the editing process, you know, have an easier time, you know, organizing it. It just becomes this like creative cycle that you kind of never want to stop. Or at least I don't.
Just fast forward to like today, as a creative and everything you do, how do you make money? Like, how do you describe your job? Like, if you said, this is how I make money, this is what I work on, how does it work?
The way I make money is typically through fees as either a director or an editor or more recently a producer on various media projects. Those fees are usually negotiated either by myself or a representative and a producer, or a client. And I have a good amount of experience doing that because, like I said, I didn't go to film school. So when I graduated college, it was important to me to continue making work and getting better at the technical parts of filmmaking. So I made myself available with a partner at the time. He and I kind of like started a business together, I guess you could say, where we were doing like videos and creative branding for like local businesses. So we would work with like a pizza store or like a local bank or a nonprofit and like create content for them to use to market their business. And while some of that was maybe not the most exciting creative work, what it was doing was allowing me to get reps in of making things, even if it wasn't all that exciting. And even in those experiences, those early, like I'll call them commissions, I'd sneak in like a creative idea here and there. You know what I mean? It may not, like, none of that stuff in the early days is still on my website or in my portfolio, but it sort of laid the groundwork for both my artistic and creative sensibilities. But on the business side, I had to learn how to work with clients. And one thing that I learned early on was getting feedback on commission jobs. Like I said, when I'm working with a client, it's not like my art project. It's not like it's something that I'm making, art for art's sake. Usually it's a marketing asset that a company is paying me to make for them to use for their business. And especially in the early days, like I didn't have everything that I'd made up until I started to like really work as a professional was like, silly YouTube videos or like experimental short films or, documentaries that I wanted to make purely because I just wanted to make them. Now I'm in a situation where someone is paying me to make something for them. And I specifically remember, early experiences with clients where I would get feedback on, a cut of a film that I was making for them. And that, might have been critical or just not, reflected them in the way that they wanted to be reflected. And I would get defensive about it because I looked at it as, this is my art, like, what do you mean, But so that was a skill really that I had to learn over time to remind myself, leave your, ego at the door, especially when you're dealing with clients because they're paying you to make something for them. And B, how to take that information, because a lot of times clients aren't artists or creatives. They don't know exactly how to articulate what it is that they do or don't like about what you've made for them. And I've had to learn to sort of like translate those notes, that feedback, into practical, terms so that I can actually like get it to a place where they're happy with it. And through that process and over time, I actually started to really enjoy fielding notes from clients and getting it to a place where they were like excited to share this with their, customers or audience, whatever you want to call them. I came to really like that experience, but it was a process that I had to get better at.
I mean, at this point, you've done a bunch of films that you've directed. You've done a bunch of corporate stuff, and you've done a ton of stuff in like the music world, specifically with Dreamville and J. Cole. How did you get into that like world? Like, how did you start working with Cole, and what year was it? And
Yeah. Well, again, similar to the like commission stuff that I was just talking about, while I was doing that, I was also working with local artists and some of my friends who were making music. So I would make like, a live video for them so that they could put it on their Facebook or YouTube or something, or a music video for similar purposes. And, that was a lot more creative usually because it was like much lower stakes, and the sort of like form of music content, music videos, concert films, etc., is just a lot more experimental. Plus, it was largely unknown artists that I was working with. So they were just happy to have something to like put on their YouTube or Facebook or social media, whatever. I was living in North Carolina at the time. I finished high school in Charlotte. And I kind of reached a point where I was feeling like I had kind of hit a ceiling in terms of like the type of work or the caliber of work that I wanted to do. And I essentially was sort of faced with the reality of like, all right, I'm going to have to, in order to work on bigger and more interesting projects, in my opinion, I'm going to either have to move to New York or LA. And I went to college in New Jersey, so I would come into the city a lot. I had a decent familiarity with New York. I always found New York to be, early on, it's different now because, I've built a career and a bit of a, reputation for myself. But when I was like just starting off, I did not feel like I had access to anyone in New York. Like it was all about what you've done and, the sort of like feathers in your cap, if you will. When I went out to LA, I love LA. I will always love LA. But I just found it a lot easier to get my foot in the door because in my experience, there was a lot of like, I just want to pass this work off to somebody else to do. That was kind of the mentality that I found when I went out there to visit when I was 23, 24.
I find LA really accessible for people.
It's very accessible.
Like I've never lived in New York, but yeah, when I moved there, I was like surprised. Everyone always kind of says the opposite in some ways, and I was surprised how like you could get in a lot of rooms.
You really can. Yeah. And I have a theory about that too, which is I think because, in New York, for instance, like you're on the subway, you're in close proximity to each other. Everyone's kind of like layered on top of each other. You're constantly surrounded by people. In LA, you're in your car. It's much bigger. It's kind of easier to get into a more solitary lifestyle. And my theory is that it was easier to like get in touch with people or like set a meeting with somebody or like a lunch or something because I think people are maybe a little lonelier.
Yeah.
So they're like, yeah, sure, I'll like talk to you.
All those people still like do stuff for fun. So if you go to a party and you just like talk to people normally, it's like everyone there either like works for, like if you're in music, right?
Yeah.
If you go to a party, it's like everyone there works for a label, works for management.
Mm-hmm.
And so you end up just meeting, all people like through normal things because everyone does something there kind of. So
absolutely.
I found that interesting when I moved.
I was really struck, especially having basically struck out every time I tried it in New York, how easy it was to meet people when I got to LA.
Interesting.
So when I got to LA, I started working at a post-production house as an editor. I was telling you at lunch, like and this goes back to my, sort of strategy as a professional, as a business person. Like I knew that it was not realistic for me to move to LA and be like, I'm going to just direct, I didn't think that was something that I could get to right off the bat. And also I come from a very DIY background. Like a lot of the filmmakers of my generation were part of the, what's called the DSLR revolution when, basically you were able to use, historically photography cameras to capture like really high quality video. And of course, like editing software was much more easily available, and you could make films with much fewer resources. So editing, like I said, was what I gravitated towards in my professional life. And because that's like, considered somewhat of a tedious task to a lot of people, that is work that people were happy to, pass on to me. And again, to the sort of accessibility of LA, I started working without knowing a single person. Like I had a couple friends that moved out there, but I had no connections in the industry. And just by like answering job boards and like, basically making myself available, like known to be available, I was working within a few weeks of moving there. They weren't glamorous jobs by any means, and I did some weird ones, but I was making money, and eventually I got connected with a producer at a post-production house in Silver Lake. It's no longer around, but at the time they were doing a lot of like commercials, documentaries, feature films, all sorts of different things. And the producer looked at my portfolio and said he thought that it was good, and there might be a place for me to work there as a freelancer. And the first project that he assigned me was a documentary for J. Cole. So, he and I started working together then. We had good chemistry. And after a while, he was recording Forest Hills Drive, 2014 Forest Hills Drive at that time, and in LA. And when he went back east to finish the album here in New York, he invited me to come film it. He asked if I could film, which I don't really like. I have, but I would not call myself a camera person or like a cinematographer. But he was like, "Can you film too? Like, you're a great editor, but can you like shoot stuff for me too?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure," But like, I didn't really have that like expertise. But I figured it out, and again, I'd been around like filmmaking. I'd been directing films. Like I knew my way around cameras, and then of course the edge that I had was like I could then take things that I'd filmed and quickly make them into something that was presentable to him. And I think that impressed him, that I could like kind of by myself just like make things for him, and those early recordings that I did with him ended up being the first part of a series that we licensed to HBO, 18 months later. A lot of that series I shot and edited all by myself. Eventually, when we got to the concert film, which went on the broadcast of HBO in 2016, we hired a crew to like film multiple cameras. That was the show. It was the last show of his Forest Hills Drive tour, where Drake and Jay-Z came out as surprise guests, and it was in his hometown of Fayetteville. Like I said, last show of this like huge tour that he did. And we had like, I think 8 or 9 cameras and, filmed in Fayetteville for a week or so before and after, I think, the show.
There's a good lesson in that, what you said. It's like, I think a lot of people just box themselves in. It's like, I'm an editor. Mm-hmm. And then if someone asks you to do something else, a lot of people will be like, oh no, I just edit. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people, like especially like more high profile people, it's more about the trust than anything. It's like, so he trusted you.
Yes.
And then it's like, he wants you to do everything. Yeah. And then if you can figure that out, you don't need to be like, at that time, the best in the world at holding a camera, but it's just the trust. And it's like, that's like a lot of things in life,
Yeah. And also just figuring it out together. Like I was telling you earlier, as I've, sort of progressed as a director, I've had the opportunity to pitch on like big commercial projects and other films. And I've frankly never had, or I haven't had much success in just sort of like, getting, they're called boards or like a creative brief from like an advertising agency and just like drawing up a concept, sending it over, and you get an up or down vote, essentially. I've not had great success getting jobs like that. I have lots of friends and peers that have, But where I think I work best is when I can just like start off with a client or collaborator or whatever you want to call them with a conversation of like, well, what are your intentions here? Like, what do you want to say? Like, what are some things that you like? You know, what are some things that you don't like? And then start with some bad ideas just to like get those out of the way until it leads you to another idea and then another idea and then eventually to the idea that you end up making. So for me, it's always been better to be involved more holistically in things. And again, back to, you know, my relationship with J. Cole, like, you know, I didn't start off as his creative director. Like I said, I was an editor, then I was shooting things for him. And all the while I was just like, you know, we built a relationship together. That trust started to grow. And I just started like pitching ideas to him, you know, like, what if we did this? What if you did that? You know? And at some point he, I think, was impressed by, you know, the sort of self-starter nature of me and my creative sensibilities that he was, you know, asked me to sort of expand my role and be a creative director for him, which then got into like advising on stage direction for his tours and stuff, like things that I'd never really expected to do, you know, before. A podcast that we just put out last year, Inevitable, merch design, things like that. Like I had not really like, that wasn't on my bingo card, but you know, ultimately back to what I was saying earlier, it's about storytelling, it's about creativity. And I have come to learn throughout my career that there are so many different avenues to be creative. And that's really expanded my my palette, you know, for sure. But also my interests.
So now, like, it's been like over 10 years of working with J. Cole and Dreamville.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before, we were just saying like how cool it is that when you work with an artist that's that big, you get to look at creativity through a different lens. Because if it's a brand new artist or a brand new podcast or brand, it's like, you know, what is the low-hanging fruit that we can do? And,
right.
you know, it's creating short form and a million videos a day. But with someone that big, you get to really be creative because there's so much demand for the product, basically.
Yeah.
So what have been your favorite things? I mean, you've worked on a ton of his music videos, like you said, stage design, album rollouts, merch. What have been like some of your favorite things over the years that you worked on with J. Cole and Dreamville?
Definitely the first, well, we did two projects with HBO. One was the Forest Hills Drive concert film and documentary series. The other was the For Your Eyes Only single documentary, which was, you know, kind of this experimental hybrid documentary music video album, visual album thing. Both of those projects were amazing to work on because I was very much they were born of my idea, you know. They were created by me and they were executed and finished by me. And you know, HBO, it's changed since then, but since they've become Max or whatever. But at the time, HBO was such a sterling brand, you know, and everything that was on that was like done at a very high level. And I remember actually, I can't remember his name, but the president of HBO emailed us after one of our broadcasts. I think it was the For Your Eyes Only film, and said that last night was an example of HBO at our best. And, you know, as somebody that grew up watching, you know, The Sopranos and Band of Brothers and Entourage and like all these incredible HBO and all the documentaries and the boxing specials and the concert specials, like that was a very gratifying thing for me to be able to do. And that we got to do it exactly how we wanted to was really cool as well. So I would say that was definitely a highlight.
And for the HBO stuff, like,
yeah,
how does a deal like that work?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting question. So yeah, a lot of HBO originals are like developed by HBO, financed by HBO, and then owned by HBO. In our instance, Cole, and he is a really interesting thing about pretty much everything that he does, especially now, not so much in the early days, but definitely now, is he's such a believer in himself, and he's always willing to bet on himself. He doesn't want to be indebted to other people, and will finance his own projects. He also has the means to be able to do that now. He obviously couldn't in the early parts of his career. So with the HBO projects, he financed them.
How much does something like that cost?
I mean, honestly, the concert film was, I'm embarrassed to say how much it was, because it should have been a lot more. But I think we shot the concert film for like 50 or 60 grand. And then post-production was probably another, like, because we did a few different films as part of the series, and color and audio mix. It was a pretty intense, labor-intensive process. That might have been another, call it 80K maybe. But we licensed it to HBO for 2 years for several times that, and we still own that IP, So if we want to, we haven't put it out since the license expired with HBO.
You could like resell it somewhere else, and that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Whereas if they paid up front, it's kind of like a record deal or something. Yeah,
they own
it,
the
then
material.
That's it. You just get paid for
exactly.
That's
and that's a practice that Cole has implemented in many parts of his business, which I deeply respect. Knowing some of the ins and outs of that.
Yeah. What other projects have been really cool to work on?
I would say another one that was really amazing to work on, it was kind of a two-parter, was when he was putting out his album KOD. I co-directed 2 music videos with him. One was ATM, which was the lead single on the album, which was this sort of like Hype Williams homage, sort of like big sets and cartoonish visual effects. It was like kind of a Hype Williams meets Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas story of this character who's on this like constant pursuit of money, no matter what. And it's like kind of twisted. The editor, I hired an editor for that film, and he described it as like a fucked up Beyonce video, which I thought was kind of a cool way to describe it. But we did that, and then Kevin's Heart, which Kevin Hart was in, that was kind of around his whole like cheating and extortion controversy that he was involved in several years ago. And it was him kind of day in the life of Kevin Hart being met with either like scorn or adulation from like people in, everyday life. But we had Kevin Hart in the film, or the music video. It was kind of a film because it was very like narrative driven.
Another example of being able to do things at a really cool scale.
Oh yeah. I mean, Cole could literally like call Kevin Hart and be like, hey, can you come by the studio? I have this idea for you. You know what I mean?
It's like part 1 is the idea and part 2 is actually being able to execute it, which is really cool.
Yeah. So that was just cool to like work with Kevin Hart and like be, in his orbit for a couple days. And then most recently, I would say the audio series that we released last winter, Inevitable, and that process, that sort of campaign leading up to the 10-year anniversary of Forest Hills Drive and the releases of the mixtapes that kind of came out in concert with the episodes of the series that corresponded to them, was also just an amazing experience because it felt like we were doing something that people hadn't done before. And honestly, I think that is true of the documentaries that we did with HBO several years earlier. Like now, every artist has a documentary about them. That wasn't really the case at the time. Beyonce, I think, had started doing. She's done several documentaries now, but it certainly wasn't as commonplace as it is now. And I think that it was influential. It became influential after we did it, or once because we did it.
Yeah, let's talk about that Inevitable series. Like, so I love the idea of just like for going through a career basically and like reliving all the albums and all the nostalgic moments, especially with a fan base like he has. Like, how did that come about? Because you're an executive producer on that. You're like on the mic.
Yep.
And so it's Ebe, J. Cole, and you.
Yep.
How did it come about?
It had been an idea that Cole and Ebe had been kicking around for a while. Even for a couple years before we actually recorded it. Ebe had found this laptop that had all these old demos and like unreleased songs on it. And they were kind of playing it for each other over early in the pandemic when everybody was, sheltering at home or sheltering in place, whatever, staying home. and it just sort of like got them thinking about all these old, all these memories that they had, and sort of like related to where they were when they recorded these songs and blah, blah, blah. And I think they thought that it would be a really good podcast, but they didn't know like how to go about making it. And it had come up in conversation a couple of times, and I had agreed that I thought that was a cool idea. I told them that I thought that would be something people would be interested in listening to, but that was kind of all I said. Again, I had not made a podcast before. I listen to podcasts. I wouldn't call myself like a vociferous podcast listener by any means, but like I like them. And then one day Cole called me and he was like, I actually think I know how we can do this. He was like, would you be down with like sitting down with me and Ebe and sort of helping guide the conversation? And really, he's said this many times throughout our working relationship, just ask questions. He likes it when I'm a very inquisitive guy. I'm a Jew, I think that's part of our history of being very inquisitive people and questioning authority and all these things. I've always like felt very comfortable asking questions in all aspects of my life, and with Cole, especially when I first got to know him, I had so many questions for him because I was a fan, and I remember like several experiences where I asked him some like kind of intimate like details about his business and things like that he was like very open about. And when he met me with that openness, it just sort of snowballed into me asking more and more questions. Yeah. And of course, as a documentary filmmaker, that's a very valuable, characteristic to have, because that's how you cull a story from a character. But yeah, when he, kind of called me that day and was like, yeah, can you just like ask questions? Like, I was like, yeah, of course. It sounds great. Again, had not ever really thought of myself as someone that would make a podcast or be on a podcast. And in fairness, like I am on the podcast, but I don't talk very much. Like the focus is him and Ebe and really him. But Ebe is a very prevalent, he's got a, big presence on the show. And I am with my films, I try to remove myself as much as I can, because to me, it's all about the characters that I'm, working with. But this was a funny experience for me because, I'm on the record with them. I'm in the recording. So I can't remove myself. But even still, I tried to remain, as light. I tried to keep as light of a presence as possible, so that, they can be the primary speakers on it, which they are.
What's the most surprising thing that came out of those sessions? Was there like a story or like something where you like picked up something from like, from listening to these things or? I
mean, there were so many moments that, because, like I said, I'm familiar with Cole's career. I've been working with him for a long time. I know a lot of the stories about him. Granted, a lot of the stuff that we covered in the first season was before we met, but even still, like he talks a lot about it in his music. He's done lots of interviews, etc. So I may have known like the top line of certain things that we talked about, but I didn't know the behind the scenes, aspects of them. And I didn't know like the degree to which he was going through a lot of personal turmoil, and the challenges that he was facing. But I would say, probably the most striking or surprising moment was when we were in the Born Sinner era. It became episode 8, I believe, of season 1, Born Sinner Part 2. It's either Born Sinner Part 1 or Part 2. It might have been episode 7. I think it was episode 7, actually. He was playing some songs that were on a mixtape called Truly Yours. And one of them that he played was a song. It's a Lauryn Hill sampled song called Can I Holla at You, which is a very personal song about his relationship with his stepfather. And he got emotional. And I was not expecting that at all. I'd never seen him cry. We've had like personal conversations with each other and shared emotions with each other, but I'd never seen him get emotional like that and cry, which, looking back, I'm so glad that happened because, he's such an influential figure. Yes, as an artist and as a recording artist, but he is a cultural figure in the way that he maneuvers himself as well. And his willingness to be vulnerable in that moment was like something I deeply respect about him. I don't think he has been in therapy. I'm not exactly sure. But when you talk to him sometimes, it feels like he's someone that has been in therapy or is just at least extremely in touch with his emotions. He's very emotionally intelligent. And so he's very easy to get like wrapped up in a conversation with on like pretty like meaningful topics too, whether like about the world or politics or personal experiences. And I'm like really, I was surprised and grateful that he and I and Ebe were able to like share in that moment and then ultimately share that with our audience as well.
What do you think separates J. Cole from everyone else? I mean, he's obviously like one of the biggest artists of our generation so what do you think he does that no one else does?
It's a combination of things. I think he's one of the hardest working people I've ever come across. He has an iron will. He has a very strong sense of self. Like he is never going to do something he's uncomfortable with, at least now. Maybe early on. Again, I met him, 10 years into his career. From what I gather, he was a very different person, especially through this podcast. It sounds like through their account, meaning he and Ebe's account, he was a very different person, or at least went about life very differently. Before I met him. But he has such conviction, which is what you want probably most from an artist, is someone that that makes decisions and puts their full chest into it, And I've learned a lot from him in those experiences where he's been like, yes, or nah, I'm not interested in that. And he has, not to say that he doesn't change his mind or reconsider things or whatever, but I've just always been really impressed. I guess the two big things, in addition to his creativity, because I think he likes to think of things outside the box and let's do things that haven't been done before. If people have been doing this way, let's challenge ourselves to think of a new way to do it. So that's just something that I get down with in a creative sense. But his conviction and his work ethic, really blow me away all the time.
When you say, he's always trying to push the barriers and do new stuff and like do all these kind of side quests. The way you guys dropped the podcast was pretty interesting too. So most people just record podcasts, put them out on Apple, Spotify, it's all free. You guys dropped it on a platform called Even, and it was $10 to subscribe and listen. So it was like paywalled, which a lot of people argue in today's media landscape, like you want to make everything free because everyone's used to free things and you're going to lose a ton of listeners by paywalling it. Obviously, like J. Cole doesn't need people's $10. So why'd you guys do it like that?
Well, there were many reasons. Number one, yes, everything is free for the most part to consume across all forms of media, news, film and TV, music, etc. And because of that, it is also free to comment on. And what I think we find in a lot of narratives around, media narratives is that when things are freely available, both to consume and comment on, they can sort of take on a life of their own that might not be true to the work that is actually being discussed. And by making our series available behind a paywall, that, yes, definitely limited our audience. Like, I wouldn't disagree with that. But another way to look at it is that the people that did choose to buy it did so enthusiastically. And in addition to, sort of creating a safe space, let's call it, on the internet, which again is pretty rare to come by these days. The internet, particularly social media, has become an extremely negative place. And not just become that, negativity is rewarded on the internet. Like, you are rewarded for being a troll. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are given clout with negativity that you share. And Cole is one of those artists that is extremely popular and very well known, and people have their opinions about him, positive and negative. So rather than let the sort of like fair weather or casual listener, or worse, troll control that narrative, we sort of gated it for people that wanted to be there, which created this, very positive online community that is still active, many weeks and I guess a couple months now after the release of the last episode of the first season. But what it also did was, let the truth of the show be consumed by, it let the truth of the show have the light of day. And for people that wanted that loved to hate on Cole or just spread negativity, the only way that they could participate in it was they had to pay for it too. So, you had to pay to troll, essentially. And there were some people that would do that, you know what I mean? But not many. And it created a space online that was unusually positive. And that was a really incredible thing to be a part of and witness.
It's cool. What we were talking about before is also like how when you kind of keep something exclusive, it creates almost a more viral marketing moment.
Yeah.
Where people are sharing all the clips because you can't get it. So all the clippers and all these people who do that want to share more because they're going to get the views. And then that spreads like wildfire. It's like everyone starts just seeing, wait, what is this thing? And I better watch this little clip because I can't go listen to the whole thing and it's exclusive. And
scarcity is what creates hype. You know what I mean? Like Supreme wouldn't be Supreme if they could make, now I guess they do, but for decades it was, you could only get so many pieces from a drop because there was only, 200 made or something. Yeah. Same with like nightclubs or restaurants that you can't get into. Like when you see a line, when you see people like posted up waiting for something, that sort of signals to the casual, fan or the passerby, oh, that must be something worth checking out.
Yeah.
So that was definitely something that was cool to see, and I think that we learned a lot from that too. I wouldn't say that was like the intention behind it.
Yeah.
But that definitely built a hype for the series that played well in the broader discourse
That is
on
cool.
social media, on like, broader social media.
Can you say how that deal works, or like how much money that podcast made, or like how that platform works?
They probably don't want me to share financials,
Yeah.
but it was through Even initially we did not share that. It was just it's inevitable.live.
Okay.
This is it. And the platform is still ongoing. Like it's still changing. We just added a blog feature, so like called the algorithm.
Afterwards, they showed Even though, right?
Yeah, and then at some
Okay.
point, we started when the Forest Hills Drive re-release came out. We put like the vinyl for sale on there, so we created a store.
Okay,
so we
yeah.
started like adding these tabs. It was this kind of like amorphous platform that was kind of being built as we were going, which that was also cool too, because it made for an interesting user experience where like every time you went back to it, it had changed, and new things were available.
Like a world.
Yeah, exactly. So but yeah, we worked with Even and Mag Rodriguez and his whole team there, a bunch of really smart people, very talented, and they take a fee for their work on all the sales, but we control we can still control the IP. So if we wanted to put it on streaming down the line, we can do that, yeah, we have full control over
That's
what
really
we want to
cool.
do with it.
Yeah, and I love the creative of basically, Cole's been teasing the Fall Off album for a long time, and it's like, okay, let's go back through a whole career that he has many fans of and go through every album. I know you probably can't say a lot, but what can you say about like the album, the Fall Off, and the future work and stuff that's on the way?
Yeah. I mean, it's something he's been working on for a really long time. The end of season 1, which sort of is after Forest Hills Drive has been released, he says on our podcast that was when the idea for the Fall Off came to him. So that was 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now. And so he's been working on this. And I mean, I think it's fair to say, I think he said this publicly, that there have been many like iterations of that album, and he's just been, he makes so much music. And even with Forest Hills Drive, he talks about on the series like Wet Dreams, which was one of the biggest songs on that album, he made like 10 years earlier,
I heard that clip actually.
Yeah,
I love that.
Insane, so he's just, it's like this, like, this filtration process that he's been through over many, many years. So I think once the Fall Off comes out, which I'm going to be honest, I don't know when that is. I think it'll probably be sooner than later now. But it will have gone through many forms of, many different forms. And, the stuff that wasn't at that top, in his opinion, that top level creatively will have just fallen to the wayside. But yeah, I'm excited to, continue working with him and our team to, make that release something that fans will really enjoy being a part of too, which I think is something that he's always been really good about since the early days of his career.
I love like people whose creative process is so detailed like that. Like when I hear something like a song survived for 10 years before it got released,
Mm-hmm.
it gives so much more, like I have so much more appreciation for that as a piece of art, whether it's music or film or, you know, any kind of art, any kind of like project. I just think it's so cool
Yeah.
that somebody really thought about something for that long,
Mm-hmm.
especially in today's world where everything is like, you know, fast
Disposable.
food version of content and music, and every rapper brags about how they do verses in 10 minutes and oh yeah, I walked in the studio, I did that in 5 minutes. It's like, yeah, we can hear that, you know, like you're not saying anything, and you know, it's like people release like 5,000 songs a year, and so I really appreciate hearing stories about that where it's like this
curation,
craft,
you know?
And the highest form of like creating is being able to do what you purely want to do from an artistic point of view and people caring. So I think that's like really cool that you're involved in something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
So aside from all that work, you've created films, like your own films. Ball People, Commute, West by God, which I saw the
You were at the
shorter
premiere.
version,
That's
the
South by.
premiere, South by Southwest 2022. So
that was so cool when you pulled up.
that was really cool to see, and like cool to hear that you're still working in that world. How does the money flow behind the scenes in projects like that? Like I think a lot of people hear things like, "Oh, I'm making this movie, I'm directing this, I'm producing this." Like, what does all that mean, and how does it all come together?
Well, for me, at the moment, it doesn't. You know, again, part of how I've sort of structured. Well, let me step back. I got into filmmaking early on, like we talked about, for pure creative reasons and just a love for storytelling and filmmaking and craft and all the things that, you know, bring most people into that field. After that initial sort of period of inspiration, like we talked about, I wanted to find a way to like make this into a career for myself. And then I spent a good 8-10 years, a lot of which involved my, you know, first period or first few years of working with J. Cole as, you know, a time of both scaling my production experience, meaning working with like bigger budgets, bigger crews, learning how to share my vision with department heads, because otherwise they just kind of stay in your head, which that's a skill that takes time to really learn how to do. And over that time, what I found was happening was I was getting so pulled in the direction of making work for money, meaning making art or commercial art for money, that I'd strayed really far from the pure creative act of making things. And by that I mean I felt my artistic voice kind of slipping away. I was stepping into all these different creative roles and kind of like living within the confines of an artist or a brand or something like that. And I hadn't made something just purely for myself in a long time. And so I made a conscious choice around 2018, 2019 to basically start keeping part of my earnings, keeping part of my revenue in my business account, meaning not taking it home, you know, and having it to use however I want in my personal life. And essentially creating like a fund for myself to create original work. And the first sort of trio of films that I made were Commute, which you mentioned, a film called Visitors, which was about the Area 51 meetup in the desert several years ago, and a cell phone sort of psychological drama called Mango. And I just made those. You know, I just was like, I'm going to put some money away and just make those.
How much did you spend on making those?
Commute was not much. It's a 2-minute film, you know, and it was all in Penn Station. I probably between like the film stock and, you know, hiring a camera person, who owned the film camera to work with me, and processing the film and color and mixing the sound and all that stuff. I think it was probably like $4 or $5 grand over like a couple years. So it really wasn't much at all. Visitors was also pretty cheap. It was just me and a camera, a cinematographer named Taylor McIntosh, who has become like my guy in terms of like who I like to collaborate with, who I love to collaborate with on original projects like that, and also commission projects as well. But we've done a lot of projects together since this film, Visitors. And that was just like me running sound, him shooting, and I rented a van for us for a week. We flew into Vegas. He volunteered his time, but I made sure that he didn't have to pay for anything. We just had a great time like filming that. It was a trip. And then I cut it Nico Bovat cut that film, who I've worked with on Ball People later. She's a really talented editor. And I think that and Mango were a little more, like somewhere in the like 15 to 20,000. I think I'd set aside around 40 or 50 grand over, a year or 2 years, to fund these projects.
I really like your idea of the fund.
Yeah.
I think I kind of do the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I just think it's like so many people have this thing of like, I want to do all these things once I get rich, or like once I get this destination. Yeah. And the reality of it is there's so many levels that most people that focus on making money end up just focused on making more money.
Yeah.
So it's like the best time. You should be like, while you're making money, doing the things that you're passionate about, doing the things that you want to see in the world,
right.
that you want to make.
And, scaling that appropriately, I'm not talking about feature films. These are like, 2-minute, 12-minute films, You never
know where it leads, right?
Exactly. And all of those films did very well in different ways. Like Commute won Best of the Year at the Vimeo Awards. Visitors got into a few film festivals. That was like when I started going to film festivals, was with Visitors. Actually, at the time, it was still in the pandemic because I released it in late 2020, but it was virtual film festivals that I attended, quote unquote. And then Mango got into the London Short Film Festival, which is a very prestigious short film festival in the UK. So like what I was getting from those first few films was I've even from the early days, I've gotten like positive feedback on my work. But again, as I got more into like the music and like commercial filmmaking stuff, I would still get positive feedback on my work, but I didn't feel like I could fully believe that because it was always connected to some other entity that people might be a fan of. In the case of J. Cole, for instance, like, sure, you might like the music video that I directed for J. Cole, but in my eyes, like, you're probably more of a fan of J. Cole than you are of like me, The music video is just sort of a vehicle for you to experience an artist that you really love, With the short films that I was doing, I was getting really positive feedback from people just like strangers emailing me online or telling me how like they like felt seen, like in the case of Commute or Visitors, that they were really like appreciative to see that reflected on screen, that they'd never seen something like that before. And the sort of like industry accolades that I was starting to pick up, which previously I had not had experience. Like we'd been nominated for VMAs, and like I said, we did a couple HBO documentaries and things like that. But again, I just kind of always assumed that was because of J. Cole. That wasn't necessarily because of me. And maybe that's being hard on myself. I don't know. But regardless, like those films were the first times where it was like, there's nobody else to consider. It's just me.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like I decided to make these projects, and I paid to make them, and I was the client. I was the last person to like make I was making the final decisions on everything. So I had full ownership, both creatively and financially, of all the work.
So how do people get rich off making movies? Because you hear,
yeah,
I feel like it's one of those.
Please tell me. I don't know.
It's one of those industries where it's like a lot of people would say, yeah, it's like these are all passion projects.
Yeah.
Even a very successful filmmaker like you're still saying like, I don't,
Yeah. No, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a producer, and she's done a couple of some of my personal favorite movies ever. And she was talking about how she was looking to get into, mind you, she was at, the Venice Film Festival this last year with 2 films. And right before she went, we had lunch. She was telling me she was looking to get into like event producing, because she was like, this filmmaking stuff is just kind of like an expensive hobby, So to answer your question, I think it's increasingly harder to make money making films. Again, there's all sorts of applications for filmmaking in the commercial, advertising, and music industries. And even in the film industry as like, maybe a crew person or like a crew member or, like, I don't know, doing like event recaps of a red carpet or something like that. You know what I mean? There's plenty of like opportunities to make money in those fields. But my guess is you're asking as like a Quentin, like how do you get to be like a Quentin Tarantino or something like that, where you're like making a good living just making films? I think that's increasingly harder now, which that is not specific to the film industry. I think there is a macro consolidation of, and concentration of wealth across every industry. So that's part of it. There's also a lot more people making films now because, like I mentioned earlier, it's a lot more accessible. Like, you don't have to go to film school anymore. Like everybody has a phone, people are on TikTok. Like you can make films, or videos pretty easily now. So there's just like a lot more competition for it. So I don't really have like a good answer for you. I'm still, going after it.
I heard you tell a story about your recent one, Ball People.
Yeah.
Where it's all this behind the scenes stuff that I find really interesting, where it's like you made that film and then it's South by Southwest. And then, so like you sold the rights.
Yeah.
And then can you tell that whole story, how that all worked?
Yeah. Well, I guess I should set that up first by saying like, okay, so those first 3 films I financed myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had some more ideas for other films, all shorts, but one of them I had an idea could be like developed further into a feature film. And that was West by God. So after I did those first 3 films and I was feeling really good about it, like I felt like it was time well spent, and I learned a lot. I felt like it was exercising my creative voice in a way that hadn't really been exercised in a while. And I was applying a lot of those skill sets that I'd learned through commercial or commission filmmaking to things that I was like personally interested in. That just sort of like got me thinking about more stuff to do. So I had another set of 3 films. Funny how they kind of came in threes like this. The first was West by God, which came about through a conversation with a writer that I've gotten to know over the years and has become a good friend of mine, Julie Blachowiak, who wrote the short film Mango that I told you about that got into the London Short Film Festival. We came up with this idea for a short film that we thought could be expanded into a feature film called West by God. And we made that. The way I financed that, you'll appreciate, was I flipped an NFT 30x'd. This is in the heyday of NFTs, the first wave of NFTs. And literally I financed the film by flipping that NFT.
Which one was it?
It was Vinnie Hager's Letters. Do you know that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
So I bought it for $1,000, and that was crazy. Like this was like a new thing at the time, but like, I was talking to you, all of our friends that were, are interested in that stuff. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I remember I went down to Art Basel. It was so weird. It was 2021.
That was like peak.
And I went down to Art Basel because I was reading. I was having all these conversations about NFTs and crypto and DeFi and all these things. And I was like, man, this is so interesting. And Art Blocks was popping off, and I was really interested in that, in the more like, sort of studio art, world of things, and Fidenza, Tyler Hobbs stuff, and just seeing these things go for crazy amounts of money. And some of the art I wasn't really that into. Some of it I was, and I remember like on some of the Discord channels that I was on, like everybody was going on Art Basel that year. And I remember it was right before it kicked off, and I looked online to see what flights were, and it was like $80 to fly down to Miami round trip. I was like, it was obscenely cheap. So I was like, I just gotta go. Like, I flew down there. I stayed at a hostel, and I just went for 2 nights. But
I think we linked up that trip.
I think we did.
Yeah.
That was when Doodles and
I like remember that. Yeah.
I can't remember what party it was, but it was Doodles and maybe Cool Cats. I remember Cool Cats was like starting to pop off, and like I wasn't on that, but I bought a Vinnie Hager letter, and I bought a doodle. While I was down there, I was just like, I'm like, I was vibing, you know what I mean? It was cool. It was actually a really cool.
So your $80 flight turned into a $30,000 profit on the NFT.
Yep.
That funded, that you created your film off of.
Yeah, that I created my film off of.
That you're now creating a full-length film off of.
Correct, yeah.
So look at that. Yeah. That's how life works,
no,
the dots only connect backwards.
Crazy. Yep. And again, now I make West by God. It premieres at the Berlinale. That's a huge deal, U.S. premiere at South by Southwest, which you came to that screening. Our actors win Best Performance at South by Southwest. It goes on to play in Palm Springs and Outfest, which is no longer around, but was a huge festival in L.A. at the time. I think it played at like Aspen Shorts Fest, or maybe that was Ball People. I can't remember, but it had this like great festival run. Goes on Vimeo. The Vimeo curation team offer it as a staff pick premiere, which like brings a whole new, audience to it. Does as well as a short film can do, and so that's cool. I get a manager through that process. I'm having like, general meetings with people. So, now people are starting to know me for that, as opposed to, not as opposed to, in addition to the work that I have done with J. Cole and the other projects that I've done in that space as well. But I'm not just this thing anymore. I've expanded my oeuvre to original filmmaking, which was always there from, for me, I was always interested in that, but I knew that people didn't see me for that. I was in music, hip hop, J. Cole land, which is this like Russian doll of pigeonholing. And so it was cool to like to step outside of that and to be successful, and like generate some interest in that work. So point is like now I'm making stuff that's playing at prestigious film festivals and winning awards and stuff like that. So I had 2 other ideas, one of which was Ball People, which I pitched to the New Yorker, and they financed the film. So I didn't even have to pay for it. They were like, we like this idea. I got access through a mensch at the USTA.
Can you say how much that would cost to finance a film like that?
I think our total budget was a similar range. It was like between like 15 and 20. I think we had 16 or 17 from the New Yorker. We might have gone 1,000 or 2,000 over, but that was around the range. So yeah, that was a crazy story because like, yeah, the New Yorker financed it. which meant they would have owned it. And they could have done whatever they wanted with it. And then we shot the film. Again, wanted to like submit it to film festivals. I wanted to submit it to South by Southwest because I loved that festival. I had a great time there, and I wanted to continue fostering that relationship. And you know, the U.S. Open is in end of September or end of August, early September. So, you know, we filmed the tryouts, which are in June. Ball People, I should say, is a short documentary about the U.S. Open ball crew tryouts. So the people that pick up the balls between points.
Very niche.
Very niche. But I just thought that was amazing. Like, you know, when I found out there were tryouts, I was like, that's a film. You know, I need to know like who goes to those things, you know. And what was interesting too is the U.S. Open is the only Grand Slam, the only major tennis tournament that the ball crew has no upper age limit. So you could be 50 years old and apply to be in the ball crew. One of our characters was 60.
I feel like you have this kind of quirky lens that you look at everything through. Mm-hmm. And like, that's where you kind of shine, where you like, most people would just not think of that. And you're just like, that's weird. And that should be a film.
Just like the minutia or the, you know, I'm like, I'm going to really scrutinize that. You know? Something on the fringes. And I'm just going to like study that very intently. Yeah. That is kind of my thing, which again, I learned through just making these films. You know, I didn't know that going into it. I just kind of made these things and a trend emerged. Or a tendency, I should say, emerged.
So long story short, you got the rights back.
Well, yeah. So basically, so we shoot the film, we shoot the tryouts, and then Pat Misch, who's the mensch that I mentioned, works at the USTA in the PR department. He held our hand through the whole process. He's a tremendous guy, really amazing person. He got us permission to film one day at the tournament. So we got to film some of our characters that we filmed in the tryouts and all that stuff at the actual tournament, which was super cool. And I wanted to have that for the film. But we were all kind of basing it around a South by Southwest submission deadline. And I basically was, you know, kind of rushing to get an edit together to show the New Yorker editorial staff so that we could get permission, sign off from them to then submit to the festival. And showed them the film, and they hated it. They were just like, what is this? They were like, this is not what we paid for, you know? And I was like, I don't know what you mean. Like, this is a film about the ball crew tryouts. That's what this is, you know, like. And it became this whole drama, and I didn't tell them this, but I submitted it to South by. I just did it. I just submitted it, and I was like, I'll deal with it. I'll deal with the fallout. And so anyway, we went back and forth for several weeks. It basically ended with the executive producer at the New Yorker saying that they no longer wanted to be a part of this project anymore. But they said you can keep our money. They hadn't paid us the full amount. I think, you know, the way typically productions work is you get like a certain amount up front, and then you get the remainder once you've finished the project or turned it in. So we basically, the deal was, we're not going to give you the remainder of the budget, but you can keep what we gave you so far, cash wise, and you can keep the rights to the film. We're cutting ties with you. And I was like, okay, all right. And it was great because like I'd made some changes to try to appease them that I did not like. So I basically undid all that. And maybe 2 weeks after they, you know, cut the cord with us, we got selected for South by Southwest. So, you know, the film goes on to have another great film festival run, starting with South by Southwest. And I think that's the one that went to Aspen and several other film festivals. Again, gets a Vimeo staff pick. And, you know, after a while, GQ comes back around. Now, GQ is also Condé Nast. New York is owned by Condé Nast, and GQ are owned by Condé Nast. And I think, no one ever said this, but I think probably what happened is they saw the film started to get successful and were like, we need to just like not keep this from going to a competition. Mm-hmm. So we ended up licensing it to GQ. They paid us another fee, which, got us back to even on the production budget. And yeah, it's still under license with them until this upcoming September. But after that, I own it again.
Nice. That's cool.
And I can do whatever I want with it.
Can you say what your the project in your career that you've made the most money off of?
The project that I've made the most money off of, I would say, is probably Inevitable. Again, that's a J. Cole project that I have a percentage of as an executive producer. So that's been that was a profitable project for me.
So because you're an executive producer, you got paid more than if you were just a director fee or something.
Yeah. But I mean, that's for like, I guess like I'm when you ask that, I'm sort of thinking of it in the context of like equity in a project. I've made more in fees from like, working at Google as a contractor in the creative lab, or doing commercials, stuff like that. But I have no ownership of those things. I'm just paid a fee to go there. But those fees were more than what I made. Sometimes were more than what I made as an executive producer. But when you asked that, I thought of like, what projects that I own have I made the most money on?
In terms of fees, so what do you have any like surprising figures that you could say, like, for like, I don't know, if you're like, I did this 1 hour shoot and I made $20,000 or something like that?
It's funny, like in commercial directing, for instance, like you're paid by the day, but it's not just a day's work. You know what I mean? It could be like weeks worth of work. So like I did a commercial for Twitter before it was X. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. That was like a partnership with the WNBA. It was like announcing a partnership with Twitter and the WNBA. And like I was paid $10,000 a day for 3 days to work on that. But like the amount that I actually worked was like way more than 3 days. It was like probably 2 months, but that's how it was like quantified. And that is often in commercial filmmaking. Now, granted, once you get to like a certain level, there are plenty of commercial directors that are making like $100,000 a day. And like they're actually doing like 1 day of work. You
that's
know what I mean?
crazy.
But that's like the top.
How do they get to that point?
They make a lot of shit over many years.
They become just the esteemed person.
Yeah, they build a name for themselves.
That's crazy.
And so you're really paying for, you're paying for the creativity, but you're also paying for the brand of that director.
That's really cool.
And that's especially working sort of like inside some of these corporate brands. That is very important to people because that makes you more likely to win an award, a Cannes Lion or a Clio or something like that, because all these communities are small, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Politics.
they can be swayed or they can be persuaded, that's where you get into sort of the politics of everything.
What's the highest budget project you've ever worked on?
Biggest budget probably around like $600K. All in. I haven't done $1 million project yet. But I'm getting close.
Would that be like a corporate thing?
Yeah. When we did ATM and Kevin's Heart, those were pretty big budgets. Those were around there too.
Is that paid for by the label in that case?
That was paid for by Cole. No.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he pays for it. He covers all. He doesn't want to owe anybody money. There are some record deals where like if you make like let's say $100,000 video, the label puts like covers half of that, and then you have to recoup the other half of that through record sales. He has distribution deals that's publicly known, so I don't think I'm speaking
where he
out
owns
of
the
turn
IP.
there.
Yeah.
So it's he finances everything himself.
Have you seen any like I feel like people who work on films, or like if you're working on a commercial for a Google or Twitter or something, have you seen any like crazy waste in terms of like, oh, we flew in like 30 people who didn't even work, or we bought like $70,000 of sandwiches that didn't get eaten? Like, what's something that you've seen that's funny?
I won't name the brand, but I remember being shown a presentation by a very large corporation for a campaign that they did for one of their products. And they were like kind of bragging about the fact that they scouted like 80 locations. They spent 200 days doing 200 days total working on it. auditioned 1,200 people, all these like facts and figures that were like way more than anything I've ever like seen. And so they talk about all these like things that they did, all the work that went into it. And then they showed, it was a 30-second spot. They showed the spot and I was like, I could have literally done that on my iPhone, you know?
Insane.
And I'm just like, I can't, and you know, they spent, I think $15 million on it, you know, just from production. That's not the media spend, which is probably many times that, you know, to place that on TV and streaming and, you know, digital ads and things like that. But, you know, yes, unbelievable amount of waste.
Crazy when you hear these things and you're like, what? Like,
Yeah.
that's people's like salaries for lifetimes. And it's like, they just like wanted to try something or like maybe use something. I mean, so wild. Have you worked on anything that never came out, that never saw the light of day?
Yeah.
But what can you say any of those projects?
I did a John Batiste video one time that I was really excited about and I liked it a lot. And it just kind of went sideways at one point and never came out. I remember I posted a clip of it on my Instagram stories because I was like, dude, this is too good to not share for like 24 hours, you know? And his lawyer reached out and sent me a cease and desist.
Damn.
But yeah, I've done some stuff with Cole that never came out. Not a lot, but you know, a number of things. Trying to think what else. There was one video I did for this like group one time. That was one that I pitched on and got it. Wasn't a great project, but you know, I brought some, I thought, cool ideas to it. And it seemed dead. Like it was dead for a long time. And then it randomly got revived and put out. And I didn't even know it happened. But yeah, that happens all the time.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I the first couple of times that happened to me, I got really upset. And then I just kind of like, look, luckily there haven't been instances where I haven't like gotten paid. Although I will say, in this field, like more often than not, you have to like insist on getting paid. And this is true of freelancers in general.
You got to chase your bread.
You literally have to like insist on getting paid. Like sometimes, many times.
Yeah.
Otherwise you just won't get paid. You know, like they'll just be, I guess that we don't have to pay them anymore.
You kind of keep coming back to this theme of storytelling. What do you think is the secret to being an amazing storyteller?
I think curiosity and sensitivity are really probably the biggest things for me in terms of like what sort of inspires one to tell a good story. But to your point earlier, what ultimately makes it great is the detail, you know? I remember talking to this visual artist one time who told me that when he was in art school, there was this saying that people always said, I don't know if it's a real thing, but he told me that it was that quality sucks, meaning that it sucks it's hard and long work to reach true like high quality. But that's what you have to do in order to make something great. You know, so I would say from an inspiration standpoint, curiosity and sensitivity are the things that predispose you to finding a good story, but the craft in it is in the detail.
So 2025, everyone's talking about AI.
Yeah.
Especially in creative fields and filmmaking. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff with content.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on AI? Are you scared of it? Are you using it?
I'm definitely scared of it. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm nervous about it because I do think that there is a potential for AI to upend many industries, including the creative fields. And because of that, I am trying to learn as much as I can about AI. I've adopted several AI practices into my work. Less so on the generative side of things. I think that still has a ways to go, but you know, I've used in Ball People. I got an archival photo from one of our subjects. So the guy that I told you about, who was 60, who tried out, he's one of our characters in the film. He was a ball person in the 70s when he was a young kid, and he had a photo that he scanned of when he was a ball person, when he was like, 14 or 15 years old, when the US Open used to be at Forest Hills. And, but the scan that he sent me sucked. It was just like pixelated. And so I just ran that through an AI image enhancer and it was perfect,
Wow.
Did like a little bit of like, zhuzhing to like, clean up some artifacts, but it literally made a otherwise unusable image now usable. And that's it's literally what I use in the film.
Cool.
I've used AI to separate audio, like music and voiceover or music and lyrics, so that I could just use like the bass line of a song and like reconstruct it to like, play a different way. What else? Oh, AI, what's it called? Transcribing. Hugely helpful. When you're working on like a documentary and you have a 2-hour-long interview and you need to find that part of the interview where somebody said this thing, run an AI transcript on it, takes a few seconds, and then, Control F, find exactly where it is in the timeline. So, and I get pretty much all of those instances. Like, it's not that I'm like taking that job from someone. That was a job that didn't exist before. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't do that, like you just literally could not. I mean, transcribing is something that's been done before, but it's very expensive, and I'm sure there are ways to like separate, audio, like music stems and things like that, but I don't know anybody that does that. Same with image enhancement, like not something that, maybe some people can do it, but like that's not a field really that, people do. But now I have this tool to be able to implement into my work that makes, like I said, a piece of audio that was unusable now usable, or an archival image that was unusable now usable. So yeah, I've definitely been, really impressed with the power of AI tools, and trying to learn as much as possible. But I'm nervous about it for sure. I think we all should be. You know what I mean? I think that trepidation is hopefully going to be what like keeps it, keeps some guardrails up, because that's what I'm really worried about. It's not so much that like it's a tool. And by the way, many other fields in the medical field, in education,
everything.
There's so many things that are going to like have like, and already are like having real positive impact on society that I fully believe in. But I definitely think that I can't remember who said it. It was a prominent AI researcher saying like, if we get this right, it will be the single greatest human achievement ever, but that's a big if, because we've had,
wild.
Other not similar. I mean, I don't think that this is like anything else before, but we have had many, quantum leaps in technology where we got it wrong and it ended up having a negative effect on society. Maybe not a net negative, it might have been a net positive effect, but a lot of bad things happened in addition to a lot of, and maybe more good things. I do believe we are, as time passes, moving more towards a better society, even though it may not feel like that in this particular moment in time.
Every other day, I think one day I'm optimistic and I go like, okay, it's like how people thought of the internet.
Yeah.
It's just going to create all these new jobs and our whole society's output will be 1,000x. And which is true in the short term, like you can have 2 employees instead of 20 and you can do a lot of things like that would have been cost prohibitive. But it definitely is trending where if you're like you're not creative and you just have a job, like you're just an editor or you're just even just a lawyer, an accountant, like you're kind of cooked, like these things are taking our jobs.
They're taking our jobs.
Wild.
They're also creating new jobs, which is, again, that's where
you
the
have
whole
to be adaptable, be able to be like, okay, now I no longer do this paperwork. I'm own the law firm or whatever. You have to be able to think like that. And
I mean, the other piece of it is like, I think a lot of us learned, particularly during the pandemic, that like a lot of people don't want to work, and I don't judge people for that. I really don't. Like, there are plenty of people in the world. Like, I don't think that should be like a necessity for living. And maybe AI sort of forces the conversation of universal basic income. Maybe that's a big
Could
maybe.
go there.
But we are, if it upends enough industries where people literally can't find meaningful work or work that covers their bills, which we're already seeing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's harder and harder to find a job that pays well, even if you're working 40 hours a week. Then there's gonna need to be something's got to give there. Because like if we live in a capitalist economy, people have to buy things,
Yeah.
we have to have consumers, they
That's
can't
crazy.
not be able to pay for stuff, especially the bare necessities.
It's a big question.
So, yeah, it's a much bigger question than in the creative field, but as it relates to the creative field, I definitely have trepidation, I think is the word. Yeah.
What do you think the next step in the kind of final evolution for you is? As a creator, you've evolved a lot.
Well, hopefully not the final evolution, but the next evolution is, like I said, I've done all these short films, and I feel like I now have a much firmer grasp on the type of stories that I like to tell, and my style as a filmmaker. So the next evolution is to build long form projects that are actually valuable. Short films, frankly, there's not much of a market for that. The best, more or less the best you can really do is like license a film to a newspaper or a magazine or something like that. It's not like much money. Where there is real value is in creating like original films, original TV shows, that have a place in the market. So that's what I'm currently working with, and the project that I've been working on for a long time and is starting to come to bear in a meaningful way is the film West by God, which I mentioned earlier was a short film that I've now expanded into a feature, and I'm hoping to shoot that in this summer.
Cool, man. Well, thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
this
man.
is awesome.
Thanks for having me. This is
Great conversation.
This is a great chat.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Of course, man.